The October rain pattered against the windows of the Drummond home, a Victorian restoration perched on the edge of Crestview Hills, where the ancient oaks separated old money from new developments. Eliza Drummond stood at the kitchen island, fingers tracing the marble veins as she listened to the steady drip from the leak in the mudroom, a sound her husband Richard had promised to fix 3 weekends ago. "Mom, there's a lady watching our house again." Eliza turned to find her 9-year-old daughter, Penny, pressed against the bay window, her breath fogging the glass. Penny's eyes, serious beyond her years, reflected the gray afternoon light. "Honey, it's probably just Mrs. Henderson walking her dog." Eliza wiped her hands on a dish towel and joined her daughter. The street was empty except for fallen leaves swirling in small cyclones across the pavement. She was standing by the oak tree, but she left when I waved. Penny's voice dropped to a whisper. "I think she's the same lady from Daddy's office party." Eliza felt a familiar flutter of unease. Richard's software company had been acquired 6 months ago, making them suddenly, almost uncomfortably wealthy. The office celebration had been filled with unfamiliar faces, most of whom Richard seemed reluctant to introduce. "I'm sure it's nothing," she said, more to herself than to Penny. The sound of tires on wet gravel announced Richard's arrival, earlier than usual. He entered through the garage, his normally perfect appearance slightly disheveled, tie loosened, a coffee stain on his otherwise immaculate white shirt. "You're home early," Eliza said, leaning in for a kiss that Richard returned distractedly. Board meeting finished ahead of schedule. He placed his laptop bag on the counter with unusual care. "Where's your brother?" he asked Penny. "Soccer practice. Coach Bennett is dropping him off at 5. Richard nodded, his expression brightening in a way that seemed deliberate. "Perfect. I've got some news." He placed his hands on Eliza's shoulders, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "We've been invited to spend Thanksgiving at the Weatherby's lake house." Eliza blinked in surprise. "Marcus Weatherby? Your new boss? I didn't realize you were that close." "We weren't, but the acquisition changed things." Richard opened the refrigerator and took out a bottle of sparkling water. "It's a big opportunity, Liz. Marcus doesn't invite just anyone. But we always host Thanksgiving here. My parents were planning to come, and—" "I've already called them," Richard interrupted, the tightness in his voice betraying his forced casualness. "They understand this is important. It's just a long weekend." Later, as Eliza loaded the dishwasher, she noticed Richard's laptop screen reflected in the kitchen window. He was deleting emails, dozens of them, his movements quick and furtive. When he caught her watching, he snapped the laptop closed and suggested they watch a movie together. That night, she woke to find his side of the bed empty, the faint glow of his phone visible from beneath the guest bathroom door. The next morning, Eliza found an unfamiliar business card that had fallen from Richard's jacket. Allison Reed, private investigator. No explanation, just a phone number and email address. Her fingers trembled slightly as she slipped it into her own wallet. By the first week of November, the rhythm of the Drummond household had shifted in ways too subtle to name, but too persistent to ignore. Richard worked later, his phone perpetually clutched in his hand, screen tilted away from Eliza's view. The promised family outings to plan for their lake house trip materialized as Richard taking their son, Theo, to sporting goods stores while suggesting Eliza and Penny could catch up on reading. Penny's drawings, usually bright landscapes and smiling figures, had taken a darker turn. During their weekly art session, Eliza watched as her daughter meticulously colored a house with black crayon, pressing so hard the paper nearly tore. "What's this, sweetheart?" Eliza asked, keeping her voice light. "It's our house," Penny said, adding a small figure in an upstairs window. "And that's me, watching." "Watching what?" "The shadows." Penny selected a red crayon next. "They're getting bigger." At the neighborhood block party that Saturday, Eliza noticed how Richard charmed their neighbors with stories of the upcoming holiday at the Weatherby estate, each telling more elaborate than the last. The lake house became a historical property, and then a compound with guest cottages. When Mrs. Fisher asked if they'd be bringing the children's new puppy, Richard laughed and said, "What puppy?" "The one Penny mentioned," Mrs. Fisher said with a confused smile. "She told Emma you got a dog last weekend when Richard took them to the animal shelter." Eliza's gaze drifted to where Penny and Theo played with the other neighborhood children. They hadn't been to any animal shelter. Richard had told her he was taking them for ice cream and to pick up school supplies. That night, after the children were asleep, Eliza confronted him in their bedroom. "Why would Penny make up a story about going to an animal shelter?" she asked, watching his reflection in the mirror as he removed his watch. Richard's hands paused for just a moment. Kids and their imaginations. He shrugged. "She probably just wants a dog. She's never mentioned wanting a dog before. Then she's been talking to her friends who have dogs. Does it matter?" The edge in his voice was new, or perhaps she was only now noticing it. "It matters if our daughter is lying to her friends," Eliza said carefully, "or if she's confused about where she spent last Saturday afternoon." Richard turned, his expression softening into something that might have been concern but felt rehearsed. "Are you feeling okay, Liz? You've seemed tense lately." "I'm fine." She hesitated, then added, "I found a business card in your jacket." "Allison Reed? A private investigator." The change was immediate. Richard's shoulders squared, his jaw tightened. Then, just as quickly, he relaxed into a smile. "Oh, that. It's nothing to worry about. The company is doing some due diligence on a new client. Standard procedure." He crossed to her and took her hands, his touch warm but somehow distant. "I'm sorry I've been distracted. This transition period at work has been more complicated than I expected." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Later, as Richard slept beside her, Eliza opened her laptop and searched for Allison Reed Private Investigator. The website was professional but sparse. Services included surveillance, background checks, and asset investigations. Eliza closed the browser quickly when Richard stirred. In the morning, she found Penny sitting at the breakfast table, methodically arranging her cereal pieces into patterns. "Did you and Daddy go to an animal shelter last weekend?" Eliza asked casually, pouring coffee. Penny didn't look up from her cereal. "No. We went to the park by Daddy's office. He talked to a lady while me and Theo played." "What lady?" Penny shrugged. "The one who watches our house sometimes. Daddy said she's helping him with a surprise for you, so I shouldn't tell." Eliza felt her coffee mug slip slightly in her grip. "What kind of surprise?" "I don't know. But Daddy's face got really mad when the lady showed him pictures on her phone. Then he saw me watching and bought us ice cream and said to keep the park a secret." Penny finally looked up, her eyes serious. "Is Daddy in trouble?" "No, sweetheart," Eliza said automatically. "Everything's fine." But as she drove the children to school, her mind raced. Richard had lied about where he'd taken the children. He was meeting a woman in secret, possibly the private investigator, and there were photographs involved. Most disturbing was the thought that had been growing in the back of her mind since the acquisition. Richard had changed almost overnight from a hard-working software developer into someone wealthier, more confident, and increasingly secretive. That afternoon, Eliza did something she had never done before. She went into Richard's home office and searched his desk. Most drawers contained what she expected: office supplies, tech manuals, old bills. But in the back of the bottom drawer, hidden beneath a stack of warranties, she found a prepaid phone and a small notebook. The phone was locked, but the notebook contained what appeared to be a record of payments, dates and amounts in the thousands, each marked with only the initials AR. The sound of the garage door opening sent her rushing to replace everything. At dinner, Richard announced he needed to fly to Chicago the next day for an emergency meeting. "But tomorrow is Theo's science fair," Eliza reminded him. "I know, and I'm sorry." Richard's regret seemed genuine as he ruffled their son's hair. "I'll make it up to you, buddy." That night, while Richard packed for his trip, Theo came to Eliza's studio where she was half-heartedly working on a painting commission. "Mom," his voice was uncharacteristically small, "is Dad in trouble with his new job?" Eliza put down her brush. "Why would you think that? I heard him on the phone yesterday. He said someone was asking too many questions and that he didn't sign up for this." Theo looked down at his hands. "And there was a weird man taking pictures of our house from across the street last week. When I told Dad, he said I shouldn't tell you because you'd worry." A chill ran through Eliza. "Thank you for telling me now," she said, pulling her son close. Over his shoulder, she saw Penny standing in the doorway, watching them with solemn eyes. The next day, after dropping Richard at the airport, Eliza made a decision. She called the number on Allison Reed's card. The cafe where Eliza agreed to meet Allison Reed was 20 miles from Crestview Hills, a precaution that now seemed paranoid as she sat waiting, glancing nervously each time the door opened. when a woman with sharp features and prematurely silver hair slid into the seat across from her. Eliza nearly knocked over her untouched latte. "Mrs. Drummond." "It wasn't a question. I've been expecting you to call." "You have." Allison Reed's smile was professional but not unkind. "People usually contact me when they suspect something's wrong, but can't quite put their finger on what. I found your card in my husband's pocket," Eliza began, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "I believe he's hired you. I'm afraid I can't discuss my clients. Even if that client might be involved in something illegal." The words hung in the air between them. Allison studied her for a long moment. "What makes you think your husband is doing something illegal?" "He's changed since his company was acquired. Secretive. Lying about where he goes, who he meets." Eliza leaned forward. "He's making payments to someone with your initials. That's not uncommon in my line of work. There's also been someone watching our house. My children have noticed." Something flickered across Allison's face. Concern, perhaps, or calculation. She reached into her bag and removed a business card, writing something on the back before sliding it across the table. "This isn't how I usually operate, Mrs. Drummond, but I recommend you look into the details of your husband's company acquisition." She tapped the card. "That's a secure email address. If you find anything concerning, contact me there, not by phone." "Why can't you just tell me what you know?" Eliza asked, frustration edging her voice. "Because right now, you're not my client." Allison stood, adjusting her scarf. "And because some truths are better discovered than delivered." She paused. "Do you have somewhere safe you could go, if necessary? You and your children?" The question sent ice through Eliza's veins. "My parents' house, about 3 hours north." Allison nodded. "Good. Make sure your car has a full tank of gas." "And Mrs. Drummond?" "If your husband asks, we never had this conversation." After Allison left, Eliza sat motionless, clutching the card. Then she drove to the public library in the next town over, where no one would recognize her. At a computer terminal, she researched everything she could find about Techverse, the company that had acquired Richard's startup. The acquisition had made headlines in industry publications, a surprising move for the larger company, given the startup's modest profile. What caught her attention were the names on Techverse's board of directors. Among them was Marcus Weatherby, their Thanksgiving host, but also Gerald Schaefer, a name she recognized from news stories about financial fraud investigations. Further searching revealed that 3 former Techverse executives were awaiting trial for money laundering. That evening, Richard called from Chicago. "How was the science fair?" he asked, his voice tinny through the speakerphone as Eliza prepared dinner. "Theo won 3rd place," she answered, not mentioning that she'd spent the afternoon in a library instead of attending. "How's the emergency meeting?" "Exhausting." He sighed. "These investors are demanding, but it's all part of the game." "Which investors?" she asked, keeping her tone casual. "Anyone I've heard of?" A beat of silence. "Just the usual finance guys. No one interesting." He cleared his throat. "Listen, I need to stay an extra day. I'll be back Thursday night instead of tomorrow." After they hung up, Eliza checked the online calendar Richard had shared with her. The entry for his trip showed him returning Wednesday. He'd extended his stay without updating it. On impulse, she logged into their joint credit card account. There were no hotel charges in Chicago, but there was a restaurant charge from last night in Boston. Richard wasn't in Chicago at all. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what Allison had said about having a safe place to go. At 2 a.m., she got up and packed small bags for herself and the children, hiding them in the back of her art supply closet. Then she sent an email to the address Allison had given her, detailing what she'd discovered about Techverse and Richard's apparent lie about his whereabouts. The response came within an hour. "Trust your instincts. If you decide to leave, don't use credit cards or phones that can be tracked." The next morning, Eliza called her parents with what she hoped sounded like casual news. "We might come up for a surprise visit soon," she said lightly. "No special reason, just missing you." Her mother's voice was warm. "We'd love that, dear. Is everything okay? You sound tired." "Everything's fine," Eliza lied. "Just busy with the holidays coming up." After dropping the children at school, she drove to the bank and withdrew $5,000 from their joint savings account, enough to get by if they needed to leave, not enough to immediately alert Richard. The teller gave her a curious look but processed the transaction without comment. Back home, Eliza went through Richard's papers more thoroughly. In the back of his file cabinet, she found documents related to the acquisition, papers Richard had told her were just boring legal stuff when she'd offered to help organize them. Now, reading carefully, she discovered that Richard had been made a silent partner in a subsidiary company called Meridian Holdings, with a substantial stock allocation. She searched for Meridian Holdings online and found almost nothing, just a corporate registration in Delaware and a connection to an import business based in Boston. The lack of information was itself suspicious for a company supposedly worth millions. By the time she picked up the children from school, Eliza had made a decision. They would go to her parents' house for the weekend, leaving before Richard returned. She needed time to think, to plan, to understand what was happening. She told the children they were going for a surprise visit, and their excitement at seeing their grandparents temporarily overshadowed their questions about why Daddy wasn't coming. As Eliza helped Penny pack, her daughter asked, "Are we running away from the shadows, Mom?" Eliza's hands stilled on the small suitcase. "What shadows, honey?" "The ones around Daddy. They get bigger when he's on his special phone." Penny hugged her stuffed rabbit close. "And there's a man who watches our house at night sometimes. I see his car from my window." Eliza felt her heart rate accelerate. "When did you see this man?" "Last night. And the night before Daddy went to Chicago." Penny's eyes were wide and serious. "He was taking pictures." After the children were asleep, Eliza double-checked their packed bags and placed them by the back door. Then she went to the front window and scanned the street. There were no unfamiliar cars, no signs of anyone watching. Still, she drew all the curtains and checked that the doors were locked. She was about to go upstairs when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Don't go to your parents. He knows that's where you'd go. Call this number tomorrow from a public phone." The message was signed simply A. Eliza stared at the screen, her hands trembling. How had Allison gotten her number? And more importantly, how would Richard know she was planning to leave? Unless he was having her watched as well. The house suddenly felt like a trap, its familiar corners holding new threats. Eliza moved through the rooms, checking windows and doors again, her mind racing. The children were safest here for tonight, she decided. Tomorrow she would find a way to call Allison, and then they would go, but not to her parents' house. As she climbed the stairs to check on Penny and Theo, her phone buzzed again. This time it was Richard. Change of plans. "Coming home tonight. Good news to share. Don't wait up." Eliza froze, one hand on the banister. Richard was coming home now, tonight, unexpectedly. And she had no idea what he would do when he discovered the withdrawn money and packed bags. Eliza moved quickly, returning the children's bags to their closets and hiding her own in the garage behind paint cans. She replaced the cash in an old recipe book, her grandmother's, filled with handwritten notes, something Richard would never open. Then she deleted the text from Allison and waited. At 11:37 p.m., headlights swept across the living room wall as Richard's car pulled into the driveway. Eliza had positioned herself on the couch with a book and a half-empty glass of wine, the picture of a wife casually waiting up despite her husband's instruction not to. "You're still awake," Richard said as he entered, his surprise seeming genuine. He looked rumpled but energized, his eyes bright with what might have been excitement or anxiety. "Couldn't sleep." She smiled, hoping it reached her eyes. "How was Chicago?" "Productive." He set down his bag and came to kiss her cheek. "The meetings went better than expected." "That's great," she said, watching him closely. "Anything specific you can share?" Richard paused, then smiled, a familiar expression she once trusted implicitly. "Actually, yes. That's why I came home early." He sat beside her on the couch. "I've been offered a position on Techfirst's executive team. Senior Vice President of Strategic Integration." "Richard, that's impressive." She chose her words carefully. "It seems fast, considering the acquisition was only 6 months ago. Marcus has had his eye on me. Says I have exactly the skill set they need." His hand found hers, squeezing lightly. "It comes with a significant salary increase in stock options. We could start looking at houses in Boston." "Boston?" Eliza kept her voice even. "You'd commute." "We'd relocate. After the holidays." He was watching her reaction closely. "I know it's sudden, but this is the opportunity of a lifetime." "What about the children's school?" "My commission work? The best schools in the country are in Boston. And your painting, you could do that anywhere, right?" When she didn't immediately respond, he added, "I thought you'd be happy." "I am," she lied. "Just processing. It's a lot of change." Richard nodded, seeming satisfied. "There's more. Marcus still wants us at the lake house for Thanksgiving, but he's invited us to stay through the weekend. He's having some potential investors there, wants to show off the family atmosphere at Techers." He stood, stretching. I'm going to grab a shower. As soon as she heard the water running, Eliza checked Richard's bag. His laptop was locked, but in the side pocket she found a hotel key card from the Colonnade in Boston, not Chicago, and a receipt for dinner for two. The second name was partially obscured, but clear enough. Reed. Richard had been meeting with Allison in Boston. But why would he lie about that if he'd hired her? Unless... The water shut off. Eliza quickly replaced everything and returned to the couch, mind racing. When Richard came downstairs in his robe, she had composed herself. I was thinking, she said casually, maybe I should see the lake house before Thanksgiving? To get a feel for it, since we'll be staying longer now. I could take the kids up this weekend. Richard frowned. It's not a good time. Marcus is having some work done on the place. Oh, then maybe we could postpone the Thanksgiving visit? With everything changing so quickly, it might be good to have a quiet holiday at home. His expression hardened almost imperceptibly. That's not an option, Liz. This is important for my position with the company. Of course, she said quickly. I understand. The next morning, after Richard left for a local meeting, Eliza took the children to school and then drove to a gas station with a pay phone. She dialed the number from the text. I didn't think anyone used pay phones anymore. Allison's voice was dry but tense. Are you alone? Yes. Richard came home last night from Boston, not Chicago. I found a receipt showing he had dinner with you. A pause. Mrs. Drummond, I haven't seen your husband since our initial consultation 6 weeks ago. Eliza's grip tightened on the receiver. But the receipt. Listen carefully, Allison cut in. I was hired by Richard to investigate Marcus Weatherby. Your husband suspected the acquisition wasn't legitimate, that Techverse was using smaller companies for money laundering. But 2 weeks ago, Richard canceled my services. Why? He wouldn't say. He paid my final invoice and told me to destroy all my files. Then yesterday, someone broke into my office. The only files targeted were related to Techverse. Eliza leaned against the phone booth, suddenly dizzy. Richard's been offered an executive position with them. He wants us to move to Boston. When? After the holidays. But first we're supposed to spend Thanksgiving at Weatherby's lake house. The silence that followed was heavy. Mrs. Drummond, I don't think you should go to that lake house. Why not? Because Weatherby knows I was investigating him, and he likely knows your husband hired me. If Richard has suddenly been offered a promotion. She didn't finish the thought. You think they're using him somehow? Or threatening him? I think, Allison said carefully, that men like Weatherby don't take risks. They eliminate problems. Cold fear washed over Eliza. What should I do? Get your children and go somewhere unexpected. Not to family or close friends. Those are the first places they'll look. I have a colleague with a cabin in Vermont. No phones, no internet, completely off-grid. You can stay there until we figure this out. And Richard. Another pause. That depends on whether he's become part of the problem or if he's still being coerced. After hanging up, Eliza sat in her car, trying to control her breathing. The Richard she knew, the man she'd married, the father of her children, would never willingly participate in anything illegal. But the Richard of the past 6 months was increasingly a stranger to her. She drove to the children's school and signed them out, citing a family emergency. As they pulled away from the building, Theo asked, Where are we going, Mom? On an adventure, she said, forcing brightness into her voice. We're going to visit a special place in the mountains. Does Dad know? Penny asked from the back seat. It's a surprise, Eliza answered, watching the rearview mirror for any cars that might be following them. They stopped at a discount store where Eliza purchased new clothes, basic toiletries, and 2 prepaid phones. Then they drove north, but not toward her parents' house. By sunset, they had reached the rendezvous point Allison had specified, a diner off the highway where a man in a flannel shirt introduced himself simply as Dan and asked them to follow his truck. The cabin was rustic but comfortable, nestled in woods so dense the nearest neighbor was miles away. After settling the children with hot chocolate and board games from a dusty shelf, Eliza stepped onto the porch with Dan. Allison said to give you this. He handed her a manila envelope. It's what she found on Weatherby before your husband called off the investigation. Inside were photographs of Marcus with known criminals, bank statements showing suspicious transfers, and a map marking several properties, including a lake house. What is all this? Eliza asked. Evidence that Techverse is a front for money laundering, Dan explained. Allison thinks your husband discovered something that made him a liability. He hesitated. There's something else. Weatherby has a pattern. Business associates who become problems tend to have accidents at that lake house. 2 drownings in the past 5 years, both ruled accidental. Eliza's blood ran cold, and he invited my entire family there. The authorities have been watching Weatherby for years, but haven't been able to build a solid case. These documents could help, but they need more. Dan's expression was grim, especially if your husband has evidence he hasn't shared. That night, after the children were asleep, Eliza tried one of the prepaid phones. The first call went to her parents, warning them not to tell anyone where she was if Richard called. The second call was harder. Richard Drummond. "It's me," she said quietly. A sharp intake of breath. "Liz? Where are you? I came home, and you were all gone. I've been calling everyone." "Are you alone?" she interrupted. "Yes." "What's going on? Are the kids okay?" "They're fine. We're safe." She closed her eyes. "Richard, I know about Techverse. About Weatherby. I've seen Allison Reed's files." Silence, then a long exhale. "You've been talking to Allison. She thinks you're in danger. That we all are." "She's right." His voice dropped. "But not for the reasons she thinks. Liz, I need you to trust me. Come home, and I'll explain everything." "I can't do that." "Then meet me somewhere public. Please." The desperation in his voice sounded real. "Tomorrow, noon, at the Riverside Park playground. Just you, not the kids." After she hung up, Eliza sat on the cabin's porch, staring at the stars. She had no way of knowing if Richard was truly alone when they spoke, or if he was being coerced. The man she married wouldn't put his family in danger, but the man who'd been lying to her for months might. The next morning, she called Allison. "He wants to meet at Riverside Park at noon. Could be a trap," Allison warned. "Or he might genuinely want to explain. I need to know which it is. I'll have someone watching, but they won't intervene unless there's clear danger." Allison paused. "Do you have the documents Dan gave you?" "Yes." "Bring them. If Richard is being coerced, those might be what Weatherby is after." The playground was busy with children and nannies when Eliza arrived. She scanned the area and spotted Richard on a bench near the duck pond, his posture rigid with tension. As she approached, his expression shifted from anxiety to relief. "You came." He stood, reaching for her, but she stepped back. "Explain," she said simply. Richard glanced around, then sat again, patting the space beside him. When she remained standing, he sighed. "I didn't know what I was getting into with Techverse. By the time I realized what was happening, we'd already signed the acquisition papers." "And what exactly is happening?" "Marcus Weatherby isn't just laundering money. He's using the company to facilitate arms deals, selling technology to sanctioned countries through shell corporations." Richard ran a hand through his hair. "I hired Allison to get evidence, but then I discovered she had her own connections to Weatherby. I couldn't trust her." Eliza felt cold despite the sunshine. "She says you canceled the investigation. After I found out she was reporting to both sides. Weatherby knew I was on to him, but he didn't know how much evidence I had. That's why he offered me the executive position, to keep me close, to figure out what I know." Richard's eyes met hers, pleading. "The lake house invitation is a trap. He's going to make sure we never leave." "Why should I believe you?" she asked, her voice breaking slightly. "You've been lying for months. To protect you and the kids." He reached into his jacket pocket slowly and removed a small flash drive. "This has everything: account numbers, shipping manifests, emails. Enough to put Weatherby away for decades. It's why I couldn't tell you anything. If you didn't know, you couldn't be targeted. And now we need to get this to the FBI. Today." He held out the drive. "I have a contact, but Weatherby's people are watching me. You need to make the delivery." Eliza stared at the flash drive, her mind racing. If Richard was telling the truth, taking this to authorities could end the danger. If he was lying, if he had become one of them, this could be bait for a trap. "How do I know this isn't a setup?" she asked. Richard's expression crumpled. "You don't. That's the hell I've been living in, knowing I've given you every reason to doubt me." He stood, placing the flash drive on the bench between them. "But I'm still the man who promised to protect our family, Liz. That hasn't changed." As she hesitated, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Allison, man watching from blue sedan. Not police. Get out now." Eliza grabbed the flash drive. "We need to go. Someone's watching." Richard's head snapped up, scanning the parking lot. "Where?" "Blue sedan." His face paled. "That's Weatherby's security. He told me he was having you followed for your protection." He gripped her arm. "Listen to me. Take the children and drive to the FBI field office in Albany. Ask for Agent Carter. Show him what's on that drive." He pressed car keys into her hand. "Take my car." They're not tracking it yet. What about you? I'll create a diversion. Make them think you're going home to pack. His eyes were intense, focused in a way she hadn't seen in months. I love you, Liz. I'm sorry for all of this. Before she could respond, he kissed her quickly and walked swiftly toward the parking lot, in the direction of the blue sedan. She watched as he approached the car, gesturing animatedly as if in conversation with the driver. Taking advantage of the distraction, Eliza hurried to Richard's car. As she drove away, she saw in the rearview mirror that Richard had entered the blue sedan. He had just willingly gotten into a car with Weatherby's men, either as their accomplice or as a sacrifice to give her time to escape. And she had no way of knowing which it was. The FBI field office in Albany was a nondescript building that belied its purpose. Eliza clutched the flash drive in one hand and gripped Penny's small fingers with the other as they approached the security desk, Theo trailing close behind. I need to speak with Agent Carter, she told the officer. It's urgent. Do you have an appointment? No. Please tell him it's about Marcus Weatherby and Techverse. They were kept waiting for 45 minutes in a sterile room with only a water cooler and outdated magazines. Penny colored quietly in a small notebook while Theo paced, occasionally glancing at his mother with worried eyes. When the door finally opened, the man who entered was tall and serious, with the weary eyes of someone who had seen too much. Mrs. Drummond? I'm Agent Carter. I understand you have information about Techverse. Eliza nodded, suddenly hesitant. Everything hinged on whether Richard had been telling the truth. My husband said this contains evidence of illegal arms deals and money laundering. She handed over the flash drive. He said Weatherby is planning to eliminate us at his lake house this weekend. If Carter was surprised, he didn't show it. And your husband is where now? I don't know. He was creating a diversion so we could get away. He got into a car with Weatherby's security. Carter studied her face. Mrs. Drummond, we've been investigating Techverse for nearly a year. Your husband contacted us 3 weeks ago, but he wasn't ready to turn over evidence. He held up the flash drive. If this contains what he claims, it could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for. Relief washed over Eliza, quickly followed by a new wave of fear. Then Richard was telling the truth, which means he's in danger right now. We'll do everything we can to locate him, Carter assured her, though his expression remained guarded. In the meantime, we need to get you and your children to a secure location. What about Richard's parents? Mine. If Weatherby knows about us, we'll arrange protection. Carter gestured to another agent who had entered the room. Agent Morales will take you to a safe house while we analyze this drive and coordinate with local field offices. As they were escorted to an unmarked SUV, Eliza's phone rang, Richard's number. She answered on speaker, aware of Agent Morales watching closely. Liz, did you make it? Richard's voice was tight, controlled in a way that suggested he wasn't alone. Yes, we're safe. She chose her words carefully. Are you okay? Fine. Just clearing up some misunderstandings with Marcus. The forced casualness in his tone sent chills down her spine. He wants to talk to you. To explain everything. A new voice came on the line, smooth, cultured, with an undercurrent of steel. Mrs. Drummond. Marcus Weatherby here. I think there's been a terrible confusion. Your husband and I were just discussing how to handle this unfortunate situation. Eliza met Agent Morales' eyes. The agent nodded encouragingly. What situation is that, Mr. Weatherby? Eliza asked, keeping her voice steady. These absurd allegations about Techverse. Richard has been under tremendous stress with the acquisition. It seems he's developed some paranoid theories that he now regrets sharing. Is that true, Richard? She asked. A pause. Yes. I was confused, jumping to conclusions. You see, Weatherby's voice used false concern. We're all on the same team here. Now, why don't you bring the children and join us at my office? We can sort this out like family. Agent Morales shook her head vehemently. I don't think that's a good idea right now, Eliza said. The children are tired. We need some time. Time is precisely what we don't have, Weatherby replied, his tone hardening slightly. Richard's position with the company is at stake. Surely you understand the importance of resolving this quickly. I need to speak to my husband alone, Eliza insisted. Another pause, then Richard's voice, strained but clear. Liz, listen to me. Take the kids to your parents. I'll meet you there tonight. The code they'd established years ago for emergencies, meet at your parents', meant the opposite. Stay away from anywhere predictable. All right, she said, playing along. We'll head there now. After the call ended, Agent Morales looked at her questioningly. He's warning me, Eliza explained. That was our code. He's telling me not to go anywhere Weatherby would expect. At the safe house, a modest apartment in a government building, Eliza paced while the children watched TV in another room. Agent Carter arrived 3 hours later, his expression grim. The evidence on the drive is substantial, he said without preamble. Bank records, communications, shipping manifests, everything we need to move on Weatherby. And Richard. We've tracked them to Weatherby's corporate headquarters in Boston. We believe your husband is being held there while they try to determine what evidence he's gathered and who he's shared it with. Can you get him out? We're preparing to execute search warrants at multiple Techers locations, including headquarters. But these operations take time to coordinate. How much time? Eliza demanded. My husband could be. We understand the urgency, Carter interrupted. But rushing in without proper preparation could put him in more danger. That night, after the children had finally fallen asleep in the strange apartment, Eliza sat by the window, watching the streets below. Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard's number, heading to Lake House with Marcus. Come tomorrow. All is well. She showed the message to the agent on duty, who immediately forwarded it to Carter. Within minutes, the agent's phone rang. Change of plans, he said after a brief conversation. They've moved the operation up. Teams are moving into position at Techverse HQ in the Lake House now. I need to be there, Eliza said, surprising herself with her certainty. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. Weatherby is expecting me and my children. If we don't show up, he'll know something's wrong. She stood, her decision made. I'll wear a wire. I can get Richard away from him while your team moves in. Mrs. Drummond. My children stay here, she continued. But I'm going to that lake house. Either with your help or without it. After hours of argument and planning, a compromise was reached. Eliza would go to the lake house, wired and under surveillance, with a tactical team hidden nearby. She would claim the children were with her parents until she could be sure the situation was safe. The drive to Weatherby's lake house the next morning was the longest of Eliza's life. The property came into view like something from a magazine, a sprawling timber and glass structure overlooking a pristine lake, mountains rising behind it. In another context, it would have been breathtaking. Weatherby himself met her at the door, the perfect host. Eliza, may I call you Eliza? Welcome. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Richard will be so pleased you came. He's down at the boathouse, checking out my new yacht. I thought we should talk first, Eliza said, following him into a great room with soaring ceilings. About these misunderstandings. Yes, unfortunate business. Weatherby gestured for her to sit. Your husband has quite an imagination. Corporate espionage, money laundering, arms dealing, all because he misinterpreted some standard offshore accounting practices. And what about the 2 people who drowned here? The question slipped out before she could stop herself. Something dangerous flashed in Weatherby's eyes, quickly masked. Tragic accidents. This lake can be treacherous if you don't know its currents. He studied her. Richard mentioned you're an artist. I'd love to show you my collection. Perhaps you could even create something for this space. Where are my children? Richard's voice came from the doorway. He looked pale and exhausted, a small cut above his eye, but otherwise unharmed. Eliza rose. With my parents. I wanted to make sure everything was sorted out first. Richard's eyes held hers, communicating silent relief. Wise decision. Always the protective mother, Weatherby commented, his tone light but his gaze calculating. Well, now that we're all here, why don't we take that tour of the boathouse I promised? The view of the mountains from the water is spectacular. Understanding passed between Eliza and Richard. The boathouse, isolated, over water, the perfect place for an accident. Actually, Eliza said, I'd love to see the art collection first. Weatherby's smile tightened. The light is better now for the lake. The collection can wait. Marcus was just telling me about the dangerous currents, Eliza said to Richard. Apparently people have drowned here. Only the careless, Weatherby said sharply. Then, regaining his composure, shall we? He gestured toward French doors leading to a path that wound down to the water. As they walked, Richard maneuvered to place himself between Eliza and Weatherby. Where's Allison Reed? He asked suddenly. Weatherby's step faltered slightly. Who? The private investigator whose office was broken into the day after I canceled her services. The one whose files on you were stolen. I have no idea what you're talking about. They had reached the boathouse, a modern structure extending over the water, large enough to house several boats. As Weatherby unlocked the door, Eliza noticed a slight tremor in his hand. Inside, a sleek yacht was docked in a slip, ready for use. The boathouse was immaculate, with equipment neatly arranged and a small sitting area overlooking the water. Beautiful, isn't it? Weatherby moved toward a control panel on the wall. Let me open the bay doors so you can appreciate the full effect. As hydraulics hummed and the large doors began to part, revealing the expanse of the lake, Richard gripped Eliza's hand and pulled her subtly toward the exit. Actually, I'm feeling a bit lightheaded, she said. Maybe we could get some water first? There's a refrigerator right here, Weatherby replied smoothly, pointing to a built-in unit near the sitting area. As Richard moved to get water, Weatherby pressed another button on the control panel, and the door they had entered through clicked shut. You know, he said conversationally, I've always found that trust is the foundation of any successful relationship, business or personal. He turned to face them fully. Which is why betrayal is so disappointing. No one's betraying anyone, Richard said carefully. There's just been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that led you to the FBI? Weatherby's mask of civility dropped entirely. Did you really think I wouldn't have sources inside federal agencies? That I wouldn't know the moment you made contact? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small handgun. I built Techverse from nothing. Created a network that governments themselves can't penetrate. I offered you a place in that world, Richard. By laundering money for criminals and selling restricted technology to hostile governments? Richard positioned himself in front of Eliza. That wasn't what I signed up for. You signed up the moment you took my money. Weatherby's voice was cold. Now, we're going to take a nice boat ride. The weather's perfect for it. Unfortunately, there will be a tragic accident. A family drowned during an outing, so similar to those other sad incidents. You won't get away with this, Eliza said, her heart pounding as she thought of the wire she was wearing. The agents who should be listening. People know where we are. Your parents think you're with me. The children are safely with them. No one will miss you for days. Weatherby gestured with the gun. By then, any evidence will be deep in the lake. As he motioned them toward the yacht, a noise from outside caught their attention, the faint sound of a helicopter approaching. Weatherby's head turned just slightly, and in that moment, Richard lunged, shoving Eliza to the ground as he tackled Weatherby. The gun discharged, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Richard grunted in pain but maintained his grip on Weatherby's wrist, slamming it against the floor until the weapon skittered away. Eliza scrambled toward it, but Weatherby kicked out, catching her in the side. She fell back as the two men struggled, rolling dangerously close to the edge of the dock. The helicopter sound grew louder, and suddenly multiple voices were shouting outside. The boathouse door burst open as FBI agents stormed in, weapons drawn. FBI, don't move. Weatherby, seeing his position was hopeless, made one final desperate move. He twisted in Richard's grip and pushed hard, sending both of them over the edge into the dark water between the dock and the yacht. Eliza screamed, rushing to the edge. The surface churned with bubbles and thrashing limbs as both men disappeared beneath the yacht. Agents pulled her back as others prepared to dive in. Long seconds passed. Then Richard's head broke the surface, gasping for air. Two agents helped pull him onto the dock where he collapsed, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Weatherby never resurfaced. Later, divers would find his body trapped beneath the yacht, his jacket caught in the propeller. 3 months later, the Drummond family gathered in their new home, a renovated farmhouse on 5 acres just outside a small New England town. The FBI had concluded their investigation, leading to arrests throughout Techverse's executive team and the seizure of millions in illegally obtained assets. Richard's shoulder had healed well, though he still attended physical therapy twice a week. More difficult was the psychological recovery, the nightmares, the guilt over having unwittingly brought his family into danger, the adjustment to life after such intense trauma. Eliza had converted the property's old barn into a studio where she was working on a new series of paintings, abstract explorations of shadows and light that had already caught the attention of a Boston gallery. The commission work she'd once relied on had been set aside for this more personal project. On a crisp fall afternoon, she watched from the kitchen window as Richard helped Theo and Penny build a treehouse in the ancient oak that dominated their backyard. The children had shown remarkable resilience, adapting to their new home and school with an ease that sometimes made Eliza's heart ache. They still asked questions sometimes, about the bad man, and why they had to hide, about why Dad had gotten hurt, but the nightmares had mostly subsided. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Allison Reed stood on the porch, her silver hair catching the afternoon light. I was in the area, she said when Eliza opened the door. Thought I'd check in. They settled in the living room with tea, watching through the window as Richard hoisted Theo up to hammer a board into place. How's the security system working out? Allison asked. Fine, though I'm not sure it's still necessary. Better safe than sorry. Weatherby had connections we may never fully uncover. Allison sipped her tea. The final report came in yesterday. They've seized over $200 million in assets, and the arms dealing network has been dismantled. Is it really over? As over as these things get. Allison's expression softened slightly. You did well, both of you. Most people would have crumbled under that kind of pressure. Eliza thought about the moment in the boathouse, the terror and clarity she'd felt as she watched Richard and Weatherby disappear into the water. We didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. You chose to fight. Allison set down her cup. Some people choose to look the other way, to take the money and ask no questions. Through the window, Eliza could see Penny now, being carefully guided by Richard as she used a drill for the first time, her small face intense with concentration. I've been meaning to ask you something, Eliza said. That first day at the cafe, you said you'd been expecting me to call. How did you know? Allison smiled faintly. In my line of work, you learn to read people. The day your husband hired me, he showed me a family photo. The way he talked about you. I knew you weren't the type to ignore warning signs. She rose to leave. Trust that instinct. It's what saved your family. After Allison departed, Eliza joined her family in the yard. The treehouse was taking shape, simple but sturdy, with a small platform where the children could watch the stars. Mom, look. Penny called down. I can see everything from up here. Eliza climbed the newly secured ladder to join her daughter. The view was indeed impressive, rolling hills stretching to the distant mountains, the apple orchard next door heavy with ripening fruit, the winding country road that led to their new town. What do you think? Richard asked, joining them on the platform, Theo scrambling up behind him. It's perfect, Eliza said, meaning more than just the treehouse. That night, after the children were asleep, Eliza and Richard sat on their porch swing, a shared blanket across their laps against the autumn chill. They had developed a new evening ritual, time alone together to talk through the day, to voice fears or concerns, to maintain the hard-won honesty between them. I spoke with Agent Carter today, Richard said quietly. They've traced the money from the Boston operation to accounts in Singapore. Eliza tensed slightly. Does that mean? No, he reassured her quickly. Just tying up loose ends. Making sure nothing can come back to touch us. He took her hand. We're safe, Liz. Really safe. She nodded, relaxing against him. The moon rose over their new home, casting long shadows across the yard that no longer seemed threatening. Penny asked me today if the bad man could find us here, Richard said after a while. I told her no, but I wonder if we should have been more honest with the children. About everything. They know enough for now, Eliza replied. That sometimes people do wrong things for money. That you tried to stop it and got hurt. That we moved to be safer. She thought of Penny's perception, how she had seen the shadows gathering long before the adults had acknowledged them. When they're older, we can tell them more. Richard nodded. I keep thinking about how close we came to losing everything. If you hadn't noticed the changes, if you hadn't trusted your instincts. Or if you hadn't hired Allison. If you hadn't been brave enough to gather evidence. She turned to face him. We both did what we needed to do. Later, lying in bed listening to the unfamiliar, but comforting sounds of their new home settling for the night, Eliza reflected on the strange path that had led them here. The fear and betrayal, the desperate escape, the confrontation at the lake house, all of it had forged something new between them. A deeper understanding, a more vigilant kind of love. In her studio, the painting she was working on depicted a family of 4, their figures illuminated against a dark background, standing at the edge of shadows but stepping into light. Not running, not hiding, but moving forward together, eyes wide open to whatever might come next. The title was already decided, the echo of silence for all the things they had once been afraid to say, and now no longer feared. Outside their window, the oak tree's branches swayed gently in the night breeze, its new treehouse a silhouette against the star-filled sky. Inside, for the first time in months, the entire Drummond family slept peacefully through the night, without nightmares, without fear. The shadows had receded, leaving only the promise of morning.